Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you can hear me. I hope I sound okay. I'm going to do my best here. Good evening, or perhaps good afternoon, or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. The Gush Etzion Foundation and the Kfar Etzion Field School welcomes you to the first ever in English memorial event for the Lamed-Heh, the 35 brave Jewish fighters who in January 1948, exactly 73 years ago, fell in battle while bringing emergency supplies to the besieged Etzion bloc. Due to the circumstances, of course, this year, our event is being held on Zoom. I am your host, Josh Hasten, spokesperson for the Gush Etzion Regional Council. I also do work with the Gush Etzion Foundation. If you have any questions during the presentation, please send them in on the chat, and time permitting, we'll get to them at the end. If you would like, you can include your email, and if we don't get to your question, if you have something for one of the speakers, we will try to be in touch with you via email. Without further ado, it's my honor to introduce Shlomo Naaman, a resident of Karmei Tzur here in Gush Etzion. Shlomo Naaman is the head of the Gush Etzion Regional Council. He'll open this event with his pre-recorded comments by discussing the Lamed-Heh and how their legacy is relevant for us today in Gush Etzion.
שלום חברים יקרים, אנחנו נמצאים איתכם לא רק בצורה מיוחדת, צורת זום, צורה שלא שיחה ישירה, אנחנו נמצאים איתכם גם באירוע מיוחד, אירוע שמציין את השנה הנוספת, את היום הזיכרון הנוסף, שגם מוסיף זיכרון, מוסיף עוד אנשים שזוכרים את השיירה, שיירה שבאה להציל את גוש עציון, שיירה שבאה להילחם על גוש עציון, שיירה שבא להילחם על ירושלים, ירושלים בירתנו הנצחית, שבעצם גורלה במידה מסוימת הוכרע כאן בגוש עציון בקרבות של מלחמת העצמאות. אותה שיירה שלא הגיעה ליעדה כי היא נפלה בקרב בדרך, אבל למרות שהיא לא הגיעה ליעדה, היא השיגה את מטרתה. היא השיגה את המטרה של גוש עציון, המשיך וממשיך וימשיך לעולם להתקיים ולהיות מרכז התיישבותי, מרכז רוחני וגם מרכז לאומי של עם ישראל כולו והגבול הדרומי, המגן הדרומי של ירושלים. המשימה הזאת ממשיכה, לא רק שהיא לא הופסקה, היא רק מתחזקת. ובדבר הזה אנחנו באמת משלבים ידיים, קרן גוש עציון, מועצה האזורית שלנו, בבית ספר שדה שהוא הגאווה, אחד הגאוות החשובות של גוש עציון, ששומרים יחד על המורשת, משלבים ידיים כדי כדי לומר שוב, כולנו יחד למען גוש עציון, נמשיך לשמור על המורשת, נמשיך לפתח את המורשת שלנו, כדי להיות גאווה לעם ישראל ולמדינת ישראל.
So I think we might have had issues with some of the subtitles, but Shlomo Naaman recalled the history of the Lamed-Heh and their meaning for those times and in our times, and he basically said we're going to continue to grow and to develop here in Gush Etzion and throughout Israel. And thank you very much, Shlomo Naaman. We're going to turn now to Gabi Harow. He is the Director of Development at the Gush Etzion Foundation. He lives with his family in eastern Gush Etzion in the community of Nokdim. He's going to share his thoughts on the Lamed-Heh and how the heroes of the past inspire the work of the Gush Etzion Foundation today. Gabi, take it away.
Thank you, Josh. Shalom, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this important event, which was done in partnership with Kfar Etzion Field School. For those of you unfamiliar with our work, the purpose of Gush Etzion Foundation is to enhance the lives of the residents and communities of Gush Etzion. We have many various ongoing projects at the foundation, and much of our effort goes towards commemorating our history and our heritage. The lecture tonight is in memory of the brave Lamed-Heh, the 35 fighters who fell in battle trying to bring supplies to the besieged Gush Etzion communities in January 1948, exactly 73 years ago. 4 months later, after years of fighting to protect their home, Gush Etzion, together with many of their brave men and women, fell on May 13, 1948. didn't know that the state of Israel would be born the next day, and that one day their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren would return to this very spot to fulfill the legacy by reestablishing the communities they built. Today, we are 24 proud and growing communities, along with Efrat and Beitar lead over 100,000 Israelis call Gush Etzion home. I'm hopeful that once the lockdowns are lifted and the skies are open again, we can welcome you here in Gush Etzion, invite you to visit the Heritage Center in Kfar Etzion, hear the incredible story of Gush Etzion's past, enjoy all the beauty and wonder that we have established here today. In the meantime, if you want to learn more, please feel free to get in touch with me directly. My email will be in the chat. Back to you, Josh.
Thanks very much, Gabi. And we want to say hello also to Limor Pearl, director of the Gush Etzion Foundation, who's with us this evening. Shalom, Limor. Limor, are you there? I don't know if she is. I know she was here. Limor, you have to just turn on your microphone, Limor. You're muted. There you go.
היי, שלום
Limor.
לכולם. האם שומעים עכשיו?
Yes, go ahead.
Good evening. Good evening to everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for this meaningful event.
Thank you very much, Limor. Also want to recognize Amichai Noam, director of the Kfar Etzion Field School. Shalom, Amichai, are you with us? Go ahead and unmute your mic, Amichai, if you're there. Okay, I don't see him here. So we are going to move on. Thank you very much for co-hosting the event with us, Amichai. Our featured speaker is Aryeh Rotenberg. Aryeh immigrated to Israel from the U.S. in 1968. Today he lives in Alon Shvut here in Gush Etzion. He is a Ministry of Tourism licensed guide, and since 1970 has been a senior instructor at the Kfar Etzion Field School. He's an expert amongst many things on the nation of Israel, in the land of Israel, and many, many other things. This evening, he's here to share and present to us his knowledge of the saga of the Lamed-Heh, our featured speaker, Aryeh Rotenberg. Thank you so much. Do we have Aryeh Rotenberg? Aryeh, are you there?
I'm there, but here, one moment.
We can hear you.
Here I am.
There you go. And now we can see you. The floor is yours, Aryeh.
Thank you very much, Josh, for the opportunity to give this lecture and to relate the saga of the 35. I would like to share the screen at the moment. Fine. Josh, you can hear me?
Yes.
Yes? Good. I would like to begin by quoting from Psalm 35. LeDavid, Riva Adonai et Yerivai, Lecham et Lochamai, Hachazek magen v'tzina, V'kuma be'ezrati, V'harek chanit uzgor likrat rotfai, Emor lenafshi yeshuatech ani. And in English, of David, contend, Lord, with those who contend with me. Fight against those who fight against me. Take up shield and armor. Arise and come to my aid. Brandish spear and javelin against those who pursue me. Say to me, I am your salvation. Psalm 35 begins as an appropriate prayer for soldiers to go on a military mission. And it was exactly on this date, as has already been pointed out, according to the Hebrew calendar, or Lamed-Heh Shvat. And exactly at this time, between 7 and 8 o'clock in the evening here in Israel, that the 35 arrived at the village of Harow near present-day Beit Shemesh to prepare to go on a military mission from which none would return. They were not yet called the 35, for in fact, at this preparatory stage, they were more than 35. But this unforgettable unit will always be remembered as the Lamed-Heh, or the 35. They fell in battle on Heh B'Shvat, corresponding to January the 16th, 1948. 73 years have passed, but they are remembered as if the battle took place just yesterday. Remembered not only by family and friends, but by the entire nation. They have become national heroes, the Lamed-Heh, or the 35. As we view their pictures here on the screen, the 35, we wonder, who exactly were the 35? Who were these soldiers who made the courageous last stand on Battle Hill and all fell in the battle? Actually, it was not a monolithic, but rather a very diverse group, stemming from different backgrounds, but united in their determination to help their brethren in the besieged Etzion bloc and to bring them crucial supplies. They were a very diverse group. For example, the age range. The oldest of the soldiers was Ben Zion Ben Meir. Here we see his picture, and I apologize. These are pictures from 1948, and they do not really do justice to the soldiers. This was the oldest of the soldiers, Ben Zion Ben Meir, born in 1911. He was almost 37 years old when he went on this dangerous mission. The youngest was Amnon Michaeli, born in 1931. He was but 16 and a half years old. He had lied regarding his age in order to be able to serve in the Haganah, in the defense force. And this is something which reflects the spirit of the volunteers, of which we will speak in the future. It was a very diverse group. Some were married, like Benny Bugoslavsky, who was born in Ottawa, in Canada, and he was a member of the Shomer HaTzair movement there. And then he moved to Montreal and continued with his Shomer HaTzair, the youth, Zionist youth movement activities. He departed from his friends in the Shomer HaTzair movement and smuggled his way into Israel, where he joined the kibbutz Ein HaShofet. He was married, but most were single, like Yitzchak Halevi, whom we see here. Yitzchak Halevi had vast knowledge of the land of Israel. We would love to have had him on our Kfar Etzion Field School staff. He had taken many numerous field trips. He was most beloved and a knowledgeable guide who skillfully led the 35 through the hill country in the darkness. Some were Israeli born, like David Tzvevner, whom we see here. He was the medic who came from a very respected Jerusalem family, while others were Olim Chadashim, newcomers, such as, one moment, yes, here it is, such as Moshe Avigdor Pearlstein. I wouldn't want us to miss him. Moshe Avigdor Pearlstein, he came on Aliyah from Brooklyn less than a year before joining the 35. An idealist, a member of the Hashomer Hadati youth movement. He was a graduate of the Yeshiva College and an admired counselor. And next to him on the left is Alexander Lustig, an extremely talented artist. He was a Holocaust survivor who lost almost his entire family in Hungary. And then he came on Aliyah to make a new beginning, a relatively short time before joining the 35. He had said that he was prepared to die if he only knew, as long as he knew what he was fighting for. And then here was a contrast between his feelings regarding his family, which he had lost in the Holocaust, and his battle for freedom in Israel. They were a very diverse group. Some had extensive military training and experience, such as, on the right, the beloved and dedicated commander, Dani Mas. He had postponed his enrollment in the Hebrew University for 7 years, during which he served as an officer in the Palmach unit. Again, the spirit of the volunteering, which we mentioned before. Next to him on the left is Eliyahu Hershkovitz, who had also served for 2.5 years in the Palmach before enrolling in the university to study biology and agriculture. Many had this military training and were students at the Hebrew University. But others, like Chaim Angel, he intended to study medicine, and he had less military experience. Some were very familiar with the Etzion bloc, such as Baruch Pat, whose sister lived in Kfar Etzion and who led many training courses in the Etzion bloc. He was one of the guards who accompanied the mothers and children who were evacuated from the Etzion bloc just 10 days before attempting to return with the 35. So he and many others, several others, were very familiar with the Etzion bloc, but others undoubtedly were less familiar and perhaps had never even been there before. Some were students in various stages at the Hebrew University. Here we see on the right the brilliant Tuvia Kushnir. He was well on his way to his doctorate after he had written many articles and identified flowers that were previously unknown. In a recent field trip, one of the participants called out excitedly, "Look, Sitvanit Tuvia." And indeed, there was a flower, a white flower, small but lovely, a flower which was named Sitvanit Tuvia, named after Tuvia Kushnir here on the right. In English, it's the Colchium Tuvia. Another student, Oded Ben Yamin, whom we see on our left, was a genius who excelled in mathematics and physics before joining the 35. Others who were not students were pioneers, like Yitzhak Ginsburg, whom we see here on the right. Yitzhak was actually a member of Gush Etzion. He was a member of Kibbutz Revadim. And when he heard that his fellow kibbutz members had participated in the previous battles, and actually a couple of them had lost their lives, he said, I must return to the group. And he joined the 35. And on the left, we see Yosef Kopler, who also was a pioneer. He was a pioneer in the Beit Sha'an Valley, and he helped the Ein HaNetziv group in their new spot in the valley. And so you see, it was a very diverse group, and yet they were united. They were united in their determination to bring help to their brethren in the besieged Etzion bloc, and to bring the sorely needed supplies that had been that they had lost in the battle just the previous day. And so, what is this Gush Etzion that they came to save? And for this, we can see in this newspaper, one moment, bring it down. It's not very clear, but I think you can see it says partition approved, more than 2/3, 33 votes yes, 13 no, 10 abstain. And this was the historic decision made on November the 29th by the United Nations. The United Nations decision to found the partition plan. Here we can see this partition plan. In the blue was the state, the Jewish state, which was to arise. In green, it was the Arab state which was to arise. And in the middle here in Jerusalem, this in the white here with the black dot, this was to be the international zone. The Zionist authorities accepted this plan, although it did mean that very, very historic and important places such as Jerusalem and Hebron would not be in the Jewish state. But the Arabs rejected the plan. And they not only rejected it, but they immediately decided to go to war. And here we can see on the map the place of the Etzion bloc, here in the middle of the map, in the rather pink shaded circles, next to the big red circle, we see the 4 kibbutzim, Kfar Etzion, Ein Tzurim, Masrot Yitzhak Revadim, located south of Bethlehem and Jerusalem to the north, and Hebron to the south. And around the 4 communities, you see in green the Arab towns which were around the Etzion bloc. And here we see Abdul Qadir el-Husseini. He was the charismatic leader of the local Arabs. He had been exiled by the British because of his hostile activities in 1936 to 1939 riots. But he came back in December of 1947 to the Arab village of Tzurif, which we will see located just west of the Etzion bloc. He was a charismatic figure, and just as soon as the Arabs heard that he was returning, many came from all parts of the country just to see him, to touch him, and to follow in his footsteps, to fight the battle, to see that the Jewish state would not arise. The battles began on the road, and here we can see armored trucks as immediately the order was given not to travel alone, but to travel in these armored trucks. And in the Etzion bloc, immediately following the United Nations decision, less than 2 weeks later, we see here the notice of the fall of the first 10 the first 10 casualties of Gush Etzion, Sheyeret HaAsara. And they included members from Kfar Etzion, the Kfar Etzion Kibbutz, and from Masrot Yitzchak, and from Ein Tzurim. And shortly thereafter, in another attack on the road, we see two more of the soldiers who were killed. On the right, Hanoch Zilberstein, who was a member of the Revadim kibbutz of Gush Etzion. On the left was the guard and medic Zerubbabel Ovadia. Unfortunately, his body has not yet been discovered, to the disappointment, chagrin, and sadness of the family. And so we see the first casualties, and it became clear that the road was very dangerous and it was almost impossible to bring supplies by vehicles on the road. And therefore, it was decided that they would try to bring the needed supplies by foot. And here we see the picture of the commander. Unfortunately, I don't have enough time to really talk about Dani Mas. I already mentioned to you that he had postponed his studies for 7 years. And he was a beloved commander in the Palmach unit. He served as the first commander of the Etzion bloc. And for 1 month, from the beginning of December to the beginning of January, Dani Mas led the communities in Gush Etzion and prepared them for a possible attack and battle. He left at the beginning of January to receive a new post in Jerusalem, and the members gave him a farewell party and expressed their greatest respect and admiration for the commander, Dani Mas. When the Gush Etzion was attacked on January the 14th, it was clear to Dani Mas that after a full day's battle, a battle in which the Etzion forces, thanks to the preparations which had been made by Dani Mas, and also thanks to a very brilliant counterattack, which was organized by Aryeh Rotenberg, the Etzion forces had a great victory, and the Arabs were extremely disappointed that they were not able to wipe out these 4 isolated settlements in the hills of Judea. But Dani Mas knew that they had used up most of their ammunition and they needed medical supplies. And therefore, that very night, between the 14th and 15th of January, he set out from Jerusalem, here, from the Beit Vegan section of Jerusalem. They began walking towards the Etzion bloc, but they made very little progress, and the hour was late, and Dani Mas had no choice but to tell the soldiers, go back to Jerusalem. You see it here with the arrows on the right-hand side. But they decided immediately that the following night they would try once again to get to the Etzion bloc by foot. This time they would travel to the town of Harow, which you see on the left of the map. It says Beit Shemesh here. Harow was located next to Beit Shemesh. And it was exactly 73 years ago, as I pointed out, tonight, between the hours of 7 and 8 o'clock, that the unit arrived at Harow. They were welcomed by the local villagers, and they began to make their preparations for the trip. There were 40 members, and then Dani Mas, as he checked them out, noted that 2 of them did not have the proper supplies. And he said to them, much to their disappointment, you will not be able to go on. This is a dangerous assignment that we have, and we must have full equipment. And so they remained in Harow, and the 38 began the walk. And after 2 hours, one of the members sprained his ankle. His name was Gafni. And Dani Mas, realizing that he would slow up the pace, he turned to Uri Gavish, who was very familiar with the land of Israel and the roots, and he asked Uri Gavish to take Gafni back to Harow. And Uri Gavish said, perhaps, Danny, you can send another soldier with us, because it would be very dangerous for me to be alone with an injured soldier here in the middle of the night in the hills. And Danny Mas agreed, and he sent Moshe Chazan with him. And the three listened to the last whispers, and they heard the last footsteps of the 35 who continued walking south, as you see on the map, and then turned east. And then comes the question, what happened? And what is clear is that they were detected early in the morning. And Danny Mas, realizing that would be impossible, as close as he was to the Etzion bloc, only a couple of miles, but he realized that there was no chance they'd be able to make a dash for the Etzion bloc. There was also no chance for him to return all the way back to Harow. And so he turned north, as you see, and he chose a hill, Battle Hill, in which he was able to fortify and hopefully spend the day on the fortified hill, and then at night return and on the path to the Etzion bloc. We do not know the exact course of the battle because, as I said, there were no survivors. However, what we do know is that the bodies were brought by the British officer, Hamish Dugan. They were brought to Kfar Etzion, and on stretchers, they were brought to this building at night. This was the Neve Ovadia building. This was the cultural hall of Kfar Etzion. It had been built in 1946, a splendid building. And as we will hear soon, this was also the place of prayer. It was used as the temporary synagogue. There was a library there. The famous author Shai Agnon used to come, and other authors as well, in order to enjoy the spirit and conditions in the Kfar Etzion hall. Notice that this Neve Ovadia building was described by one of the 35. We had mentioned him. This was described by the newcomer from Brooklyn. And he wrote home to his mother, and he described Kfar Etzion, which he visited about a half a year before the Lamed-Heh, in June of 1947. Notice this is his handwriting, and this is the letter which he wrote home. The most striking part of Kfar Etzion is Neve Ovadia, which was financed by a South African Jew. It consists of a hall for 150 to 200 people, a small library and a reading room. It is built of rough stone blocks, and a beautiful stone path leads up to it. The inside is well furnished. He's writing to his mother with drapes and so on, trying to describe the building. It is very airy and spacious and generally very modern. I was really extremely impressed. The building is not just lovely, comparatively speaking, but would be striking and beautiful in most any surrounding. This is Moshe Perlstein writing to his mother about the Neve Ovadia building. How ironic that 6 months later, Moshe Perlstein was brought on a stretcher to this building. And the building, by the way, as we saw in the picture before, this is a building, this is an illustration by the other Oleh Hadash, the other newcomer, Alexander Lustig, who on the stamp of the Keren Kayemet sought to put the building of Neve Ovadia. After a year and a half of burial in Kfar Etzion, Kfar Etzion for 19 years was under Jordanian administration, and the families asked if it were not possible to transfer the Kfar Etzion cemetery to Jerusalem. And here we see that the 35 are today buried in the Mount Herzl military cemetery. This is the area of the Gush Etzion, the Etzion bloc cemetery. Notice up above over here is the common grave where those that fell in the last battle of the Etzion bloc and were not identified, they are buried here in the common grave. The Lamed-Heh, the 35, were identified with the aid of Rabbi Aryeh Levine, but in the end they were all identified, and each has his own individual grave in the Mount Herzl cemetery. Now the question is, what actually did happen in January the 16th of 1948? For 19 years, we did not know even where Battle Hill was. And then in the Six-Day War, with a return to the Etzion bloc, the Kfar Etzion Field School was founded. We see here in this picture in the middle, this is Yoshua Cohen, who founded the Kfar Etzion Field School. And one of his first projects was to try to discover what happened to the 35. And in order to find out, they invited Amish Dugan. You see him here in the picture with the beret, and on the right, you can see him as he points to Battle Hill, because it was he who went to the village of Tzurif and succeeded in convincing the Arabs to show him where the 35 had fallen. And he had a very, very good memory. And after 20 years or so, he came back and pointed out exactly where Battle Hill was. And thanks to that, we were able to more or less reconstruct what happened on January the 16th of 1948. His identification was further confirmed by the Sheikh Abu Ibrahim from the town of Jabba, who also pointed out Battle Hill. And it said, although he himself did not fight in the conflict, in the battle, but he did help to bring the bodies down from the top of the hill for burial. And I'd like to quote a short article by Abraham Rabinovich from the Jerusalem Post, an article which was written on January the 30th, 1970. 2 weeks ago, on the 22nd anniversary of the death of the Lamed-Heh, that is to say, it was about 50 years ago, 51 years ago, the parents of the fallen were taken for the first time to the recently discovered site of the battle. Standing on the solitary hill, a white-haired father looked at the enclosing heights and said, all these years, in addition to the pain of bereavement, there was the pain of mystery. We had looked towards the trees of the Etzion bloc beyond the border and wondered what had happened to our boys. Now we know what happened, and we see that their heroism is many times greater than we had imagined. And indeed, the 35 have been known since the very time they fell to be heroes. And we have here the famous poem translated, poem written by Chaim Guri. He had heard of the fall of the 35. He didn't know any of the details, but he was very moved, as were many, many in Israel at that time. Imagine what it is when a battalion, 35 of some of, as we noted, some of the very most skillful, the most experienced and soldiers fell. And he writes, behold, our bodies are laid out in a long, long line. Our faces have altered. Death looks from our eyes, and we do not breathe. I'm skipping. Behold, our mothers are bowed and silent, our friends choking with tears. There was no betrayal. Our guns are still strapped to us, empty of bullets. They tell of our fight till the end. Their barrels are still aflame. And indeed, we are told that the last of the 35 threw a hand grenade, and in the end, it was his last hand grenade, and then he hurled a stone at the Arabs. They shot him, and he fell. In conclusion, I'd like to point out, all of the 35 whom we saw, they all heard the call. They all answered the call. They all volunteered to go on the dangerous mission to bring supplies to Gush Etzion, to the Etzion bloc. Of course, they knew that perhaps not all would return safely, but nobody thought that none would survive. They fought bravely, but they were vastly outnumbered. And after a full day's battle, the last of the soldiers, as I pointed out, was shot with a stone in his hand, which he wished to hurl at the enemy. Their courage, their spirit, their dedication, their self-sacrifice will be remembered not only on this Memorial Day, today, Hey B'Shvat, but throughout the year, and will serve as inspiration to our soldiers and to all of our people. Yehi Zichram Baruch. May their remembrance be for a blessing.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Thank you very much, Aryeh, for that inspirational and moving recount of our history. May the memory of the Lamed-Heh be for a blessing. Hold on, I think my video isn't started. Let me see here. There we go. Thanks again. I don't know if you caught that, but thank you very much, Aryeh, and very, very moving recount of the history of the Lamed-Heh. We are now going to be sharing just a short trailer showcasing, for those of you who may have been to Gush Etzion recently, those of you abroad, we're going to show you now just a short trailer of the state-of-the-art presentation, which is featured at the Gush Etzion Heritage Center in Kfar Etzion. Please God, when the lockdowns are a thing of the past, you'll have the opportunity to once again join us here in Gush Etzion and make your way to the Heritage Center to see this amazing movie, this amazing presentation established with our JNF partners, which shares the story of Gush Etzion from pre-state Israel all the way to the present day. So let's go ahead and see that trailer, please.
מה זה?
מכתבים שההורים שלכם כתבו בתקופת המצור. זה היה קיבוץ שהפעילות בו לא עצרה לרגע.
מה אתה אומר, יוסי שלי? לא ככה נראה גן עדן?
שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה.
אמן. הגענו הלום כדי לבנות ולנטוע ולהכות שורשים עמוקים בהרי יהודה.
אנחנו נמצאים בעיצומה של מתקפה מסיבית על כל הדרכים. אנחנו העמדה הקדמית של ירושלים.
אני חושב שנצליח להחזיק את המשק במצור?
ימים קשים ולילות ארוכים לפנינו.
רק היום שנחזיק מעמד. אולי מחר כבר תקום מדינה.
אל תדאגו. בפיקוד יודעים שאנחנו המחסום האחרון בדרך לירושלים. תרימו ראש, יהיה בסדר.
אתם לא מבינים ממה היו עשויים ההורים שלכם. שום דבר לא שבר אותם.
וגם אנחנו, בשעת מבחן זו, נחגוג את חג חירותנו מתוך אמונה שהגאולה קרובה לבוא.
המשטר המלחמתי ביישוב אינו מתאים לילדים. הוחלט לבצע פינוי.
ניסוג מכאן? ולאן ניסוג אחר כך? אני עם להיות פליטה, גמרתי.
אני אשים לשיעור בתלמוד שקבעתי להיום.
אני חושב שיותר להציע לדחות אותו למחר.
אנחנו סגורים בטבעת שהולכת ומתהדקת. שילחו אווירונים.
לא צריך לספר לי איך זה נגמר.
אתה גם לא רוצה לדעת איך זה התחיל?
So that is the trailer. Please God, you will be joining us again soon in Kfar Etzion to see the rest of that amazing presentation. There is one question that somebody chatted in here. This is for Aryeh. Do we know, Philip is asking, do we know how many of the enemy fell? That was a question for Aryeh, so we can unmute Aryeh to answer that question if possible.
Can you hear me, Josh?
Yes.
As I said, we don't have all the facts regarding the Battle of the 35. In one of the questions to which we do not have an answer for sure, a definite answer, is how many of the Arabs were actually killed in the battle itself. Officer Dugan, who who came to show us where Battle Hill was and so on, he spoke of something like 10 to 20 Arabs who were killed. But we know that many were wounded. And in fact, Dugan was called on Friday and later on the Shabbat, on the 16th and 17th of January. And he was told that the hospitals are full of the wounded and that he should go to Tzurif to see what happened. And so we really don't know the answer to the question, how many of the Arabs were killed. Of course, the fact that the unit had a lot of ammunition and they used up all of their ammunition probably means that many of the Arabs were killed in the course of the battle.
That looks to be the only question for now. If anybody else has further questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. You can reach us, the Gush Etzion Foundation or the Gush Etzion Field School on Facebook, social media, or Gabi gave you his email before. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any more questions. I just want to thank everyone who put together this evening, the Gush Etzion Foundation and the Gush Etzion Field School. I want to thank the person behind the scenes, Amichai Lifshitz, for doing all the technical work. Apologies if there were any other issues, but we are living in unique times where we are adapting to Zoom. Hopefully it won't be for that much longer. And as I said already before, hopefully you'll join us here in Gush Etzion very, very soon. Shavua Tov to all. And again, in memory of the Lamed-Heh and really everyone else who fell in Gush Etzion, so that we could be here today, over 100,000 proud Jews living here in Gush Etzion. So thank you all very much for joining us.